We have David here to speak to us, and he will be speaking on health. I know there's a number of people that wasn't here last week. Yes, last week. You missed the first part, but I know that the session this week will enhance, and I know you'll all be blessed. Last week as well, I had read something I was reading in Ministries of Healing, and for those that have missed it, I just wanted to share it with you, just for about a couple of minutes reading. It states in the Ministry of Healing, chapter 7, in the Ministry of Healing, the physician is to be co-worker with Christ. The Savior ministered to both the soul and the body. The gospel which he taught was a message of spiritual life and of physical restoration. Deliverance from sin and the healing of disease were linked together. The same ministry is committed to the Christian physician. He is to unite with Christ in relieving both the physical and the spiritual needs of his fellow men. He is to be to the sick a messenger of mercy, bringing to them a remedy for the diseased body and for the sin-sick soul. Christ is the true head of the medical profession, the chief physician. He is at the side of every God-fearing practitioner who wars to relieve human suffering, while the physician uses nature's remedies for sick diseases. He should point his patients to him who can relieve the maladies of both the soul and the body. Yes, and that's from the Ministry of Healing, chapter 7. So now I would like to welcome our presenter this afternoon, David. He's a doctor, and he also, some of you may know, he's a former member of Wellington Central Church. They were here from 2003 to 2010. And so I'd like to welcome them. They're now in Coffs Harbour in Australia. I hope I've pronounced that right. And is happily come to present to us and to spend some time with us at Wellington Church. So I'd like to welcome you, David, this afternoon with the message you'll be presenting to us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. A little bit up. Yeah. I think all of us, if I'm not careful, will be falling asleep. I saw the hymn that says, "He lives," and there's an exclamation mark. There was no. But I wonder whether it was because of the stormy blast. Yeah, that was also in the hymn. This week has been a stormy blast. But yeah, stretch yourself. We'll start. Okay, that should be fine. Yeah. All right. Let's bow our heads before we start. Our Father in heaven, we just want to commit this time to you. Bless, may the message that you want to be shared comes through in spite of myself. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Okay. I will, for the sake of those who went here last week, go a little bit backwards to get a context, and then we'll come through for the getting through to this week's one. All right, so lifestyle diseases and the mind. We'll end up there. So but we'll start, and I always want to start with a bit of scripture, and we'll end with a bit of scripture as well. All right, and so we've read this last week. We're made in God's image, and as I said, sometimes we do it the other way around. Let us make God in our image. Yeah, but this is let us make men in our image. And David expresses this quite well, where he says that Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. This is the Living Translation. So we are a very complex being, and I guess there's always fine prints to any presentation, and that is, this will be a very simplistic presentation of this topic on epigenetics, but the principles are fairly secure in terms of its scientific principles. So we start off, our model is always Christ, and the famous verse here in Luke 2 verse 52, that health encompasses our mental, physical, spiritual, and social. We are a being, holistically speaking, consists of these four parts. And the temptation is to focus mainly on one heavily and to the detriment of others. You know, we need to be balanced, all right? If there's one thing that comes out of this, that we need to be balanced, all right? But I will be focusing on some certain aspects of this. So that's what health, and WHO's definition mirrors this, yeah? Mirrors this definition. So, but I like the scripture one better. And so when we look at health in general, we tend to focus on the physical. So this is where we will start. And if you look at worldwide disease burdens, it's mainly in two camps. Yeah, you've got the communicable diseases and the non-communicable diseases. We talked about that. The communicable disease is what we've just been through. Yeah, an epidemic of COVID-19. But non-communicable disease is also capable of causing epidemics. All right, so diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, cancer, those conditions. And we said last week that it threatens to overwhelm a lot of health systems, yeah? Even a well-funded health system in New Zealand, for example, struggles under the weight of these conditions, all right? So I gave you these slides, and I got this from Dr. Chester Kumar, the former health director of the South Pacific Division, but he's looking at disease trends in the South Pacific. And this also applies to pockets of population in New Zealand. But it's very interesting to see that, and he uses this kind of balance, yeah? There's a middle sort of point here where it's equal in both sides, and PNG is a country that's probably just about in the middle, all right? In other words, the burden of communicable diseases is about the same as the burden of non-communicable diseases, all right? Then we go to Solomon Islands, it's a little bit to the left, so right, sorry, so it's moving towards there. And we move to Fiji a bit further, Samoa further, and Nauru is almost, it's really bad there with diabetic rates, hypertension, obesity. It's really, you know, in the 90%, right? So that is the trends in the Pacific, and that's a good slide in terms of looking at the scales are favoring non-communicable diseases in the Pacific as you go from PNG to Nauru and a lot of countries in between, all right? So the question is, nurture or nature or nurture? What is it? All right. So now I want to focus on nature to begin with. So, like I said last week, we want to know what's the underlying thing, and to do that, we really went down and look at chromosomes. Yeah, this is what chromosomes are like. All of us are one or the other, and there are 23 pairs. But more importantly, we want to go down further, and we look at these chromosomes consist of genes, all right? And these are just letters we use to determine. So up to one point, there's a gene, a space, and another one, a space, and another one. And we find that out that men thought, well, maybe we should try and look deeper into this, yeah? Can we map this out and maybe get a clue as to methods, strategies to address diseases, all right? So what do we do? Well, there's a Human Genome Project, well known. This took 13 years, beginning in 1990, costs a few $1 billion across various countries. And we found out that we have between 25,000 and 30,000 genes, all right? But then we find out that it's not very useful. It's not very useful. It's for simple diseases, and we find it's difficult to manipulate DNA and all these kind of things. So whilst it was a very a good effort to map these genes, in terms of its usefulness, it's not as useful as we'd like to think on the in terms of diseases and prevention. All right. So it's good for this kind of thing. And I showed this picture. If you see that picture, you all know we've seen someone like that before in our families. And if you look down further on the chromosomes, you'll find they all have this extra 21. All right. So that's a that's a genetic condition. We know you can't change that. It's something they're born with. And so, okay, it's useful, but it's not as useful as we'd like. So what's the question? So this, what's the thing is, in summary, we said that when you're born, you have all the DNA you need. It doesn't change, all right? Roll through life from conception to when you die, your DNA remains the same, all right? The other thing is that it's all unique. Yours is your own. And that with each birth, the next generation, there's a reset, all right? So that's fairly straightforward, all right? Basic science there, but useful, but not as useful as we'd like to think. So genetics really is a study of heritable changes in DNA. Example is what we showed, yeah? The one that has an extra chromosome. All right, so then I put this picture up. You remember that? What is that? Caterpillar, and this one, a larva, and this one, a beautiful butterfly. Now, well, obviously you can see the difference, isn't it? Once you can see the difference there. But what is the same with this one, and this one? We talked about it last week. What's the one thing that is the same? The DNA is the same. All right? No difference. And I showed you this. This is a worker bee, a drone, and a queen. What's the difference? You can see that. But what is the same all through these three different types of bees? The DNA is the same. Exactly the same. There's no difference. And so these twins, these identical twins, the thing is they both have the same DNA. But you know, they both will grow up to be the same person or different people. They'll grow up to different personalities. They will have different diseases. They will have different differences right throughout, even though their DNA is exactly the same. All right? So what does that imply? Well, we look down further and we find out that if you unravel that chromosome there, you find that there's these things in between. These round things are called histones. And then we find that what's the difference is that these things act as switches. All right? So what happens is that they have the same DNA, but the DNA that's turned on here is different from the DNA that's turned on there. Is different from the DNA that's turned on there. So expression of DNA is determined by these switch positions, all right? And so that the unique code is the same. But here, different sets of genes are expressed. So this thing comes out as a caterpillar. And as you move through there, different sets of genes again are turned off and others are turned on. And so you've got this. And the same thing with a beautiful butterfly. Same DNA, same set of genes, but some genes are being silenced and others are being turned on. All right, so that's the same thing with this. The only difference is the food they get. So there's special food for the queen, and it grows to be the queen. Same with the drones and the worker bees. So again, same DNA, but as they're given different food, different genes are being switched on, others are being switched off. All right? So then this is the thing that's called, the study is called epigenetics. Epi means above or over or beyond genetics. So we're not dealing with the DNA code that I was talking about. We are dealing with those switches. What turns on, what turns off. All right, so that's the study. So it's a study of gene expression, not changes in DNA. All right, so that's what epigenetics is simply, and it's illustrated by those drawings I've shown. Yeah. So, question is, people are doing some studies because it seems like certain conditions are seen in the next generation and the next generation. So, could it be? That's the question. Could it be that we know that you inherit DNA, all right? We know that. But the question is, could it be that you also inherit this switch position? Like if a switch is turned on in this generation, does it still turn on in the next and the next, even when the initial stimulus is gone? It's not there. All right. So this is a fairly, you can see these things, by the way, you can get it from Google. These are not things, but it's there. So, but this experiment is looking at the condition, you know, of asthma. So asthma, looking at asthma in generation. So these are rats that are given, these two are given nicotine. These ones get nicotine plus something that turns off its effect. And you follow that. Now these, when they're given nicotine, these rats have asthma. All right. This is the next generation. They are not exposed to nicotine, but they still have asthma. All right. And the same thing that goes down here. So this is looking at the maternal risk factors, but so just in case blokes think they can get away with it, but this is another looking at rats again and looking at learning disabilities. And this one, this side here is what we call a control, where the rats just drink water. And this one here, the rats drink water that's mixed with nicotine. And what they're looking for here is whether, and these rats, by the way, they experience behavioral problems. All right, I'll just say that, behavioral problems. So the question is, do we see those behavioral changes in the next generation and the next generation? And sure enough, you see those behavioral changes in these generations, even though they're not exposed to whatever their parents originally had. So what it implies is that there is something that gets switched on by this environmental factor that continues down the next generation, and it leads to the third. And there are other studies that looked at it, thought that it's gone down to at least the fourth generation will have that switch still inherited. All right. So that is what epigenetics is. Shows that in spite of the only exposure is here, but the kids here are affected and the kids here are affected with the same behavioral problems. All right. So that tells you that something has been handed down, has been handed down, has been handed down because of something that has been exposed there. Now, you might say, wow, this. So this, what is, in the end, nature or nurture might be better phrases, nature and nurture. All right. So I asked this question. For those that have been here, don't answer this, who have been here last week. How many generations are in that picture? Who wasn't here last week? Theodore. How many generations? No. You just need one. So, mother and child. Everyone, any upgrade on that? Those who were not here, those who were not here last week. You're allowed to say no. Right? 2 generations. Okay, so Theo, you've got a supporter. Sure. Okay, good. So that's the 2. You've got the child and the mother. Yes. Anyone else? 3 generations. Where you see the 3? Yeah. She was here last week. She's just sneaky. She's right. Yes. All right. So that's it. See. So you smoke there. That mother is the first generation. The baby, and the baby already has eggs for the next generation. So there's 3 generations that are affected by the mother. All right. So so far, this is what we have. Genes are expressed depending on time and requirement. At the right time, certain genes are turned off and certain genes are turned off. All right. The other thing is that in fact, they are heritable gene expression alterations. That's powerful. It's very, very, very important because it's not the DNA that we're not talking about that. We're talking about something outside of DNA, a particular switch position that's inherited. All right. So, and it leads to heritable susceptibility. All right. So again, remember those rats, but we'll come to it. And the thing is that there is a generational persistent in that switch position. And as I said to you, it can go third up to fourth generation, perhaps. All right. And we come there, that's like a DNA that's not necessarily reset. All right. These things goes beyond. All right. So now I want to go, I think this is coming on to our favorite, yeah? Diet and epigenetics. All right. Okay, so this is a pair of agouti, very famous rats. All right. You'll see this. This is agouti rats. And the thing about these rats is that the skin color being yellow means it's associated with obesity, diabetes, hypertension, those kind of things, right? Just the skin color. So you can tell this rat will have those, right? So, and the brown one is the healthy one. All right. Now these are two same. They're same genetic. You can do that with rats, so you can study them like that. But the famous studies were done with these things, and I'll go probably the next one first, and then I'll come back. So what's you see here is that if a pregnant mother that's got the yellow, you feed them a diet that's supplemented with quite good stuff, and just somewhere, and the mouse just been fed with just a regular mouse. Now, if you look at the offsprings, then the one that's being fed a good diet, actually most of their offspring actually are good, very healthy. And the ones that are fed just the usual, most of them still took after the mother in their health. All right. So there is evidence that intervention can alter these switch positions. Right? That's the lesson here. So these rats, if you look at them, the levels of the switch positions, these are intermediate ones. They're sort of halfway there. And these are ones that really are bad in terms of the health, and these are healthy ones. So these are proven, proof in principle that you can intervene, in this case by dietary intervention, and change those switch positions, that the offspring do not have those same characteristics. All right. So that's a very important point. And so that's the right. Now, so if you look at, I should have taken this out, the same thing. Okay. And you might say, oh, that's in rats. All right. That's in rats. We are human beings. All right. Well, this is a famous study, actually. There was a big winter in Netherlands between 1944 and 1945. Some clever person went back and look at babies that were born during that period 60 years later. All right. And I'd look at whether it was a severe famine, a very severe famine that affected this area. And so they wanted to look back and say, look, could it be that nutritional deficiencies, perhaps those kind of factors around that time, could have any effect on kids generations later? All right. Well, from that, it's only 2 generations. All right. So they looked at it, and what the study was that they actually quite good. They took babies and they plot which time of the pregnancy was in the middle of this famine, and those that were in the end of that famine period. All right. So quite a good study. And then they look at the risk factors. Now, this is what they found. Mothers who were pregnant with them during the famine were more likely to develop certain diseases such as heart disease, schizophrenia, and type 2 diabetes. So comparing those that were in the mother's womb when the famine was, particularly at the beginning, all right? And so what they found out that, and I don't show you this, but it's a complicated study, but it just shows the same thing as the rats, where the amount of changes in those switch position was different in those 2 groups. All right. So that's one of the conclusion at the end there. It says that the differences in the switch could explain why these people had an increased likelihood for certain disease later in life. So the thing is that right from conception, environmental cues, environmental factors such as diet, alcohol use, drug use, quite early on will affect someone's health down the line. In all this. So this is a very neat study. It's a Dutch hunger winter. If you Google this, you'll find it. So I'm going to move from, because I'm going to end up with the mind, so I'm going to run through this a little bit. But if we need to look at cancer, and bowel cancer is very common. very well studied. And what is clear is that, I mean, someone look at these factors for bowel cancer. This is aging, okay? We grow older. No one can stop that. You know, every second we're getting older. But this one, lifestyle, diet, and your gut microbiome, again, they're all related, are very important in epigenetic alteration and risk for bowel cancer. All right. So again, in cancer, we see the same effect. Now, prostate cancer, again, another common cancer. Now, don't worry about this too much, but this is, can you appreciate green and red here? You can appreciate green and red here. Okay, now this is pre-intervention. Again, with dietary, this is not humans, this is rats again. But what you want to see here is that after changes in diet, a lot of these red genes here were switched off here. Can you appreciate that? All right. So that's again studies in these animals that show that you can change these things. All right. Now a better picture perhaps is this. This is the same rats, and you look at the size of the prostate here at baseline with a level of PSA, as people who have their screening done would know. And again, a year later, it's reduced by more than 50%. And again, you drop your PSA. Again, this is a proof in concept about dietary changes causing significant improvement in someone's cancer risk. All right. Well, in this case, they already have it, but it does help. So again, you say rats. How about human beings? This is a study last year in a very excellent cancer unit, actually, in MD Anderson in Texas. But the adherence to the Mediterranean diet, do you know what a Mediterranean diet is? Yeah, it's mostly plant-based, all right? It's mostly plant-based. And the conclusion from this was not necessarily that you strict compliance with the Mediterranean diet, but if you have a mostly plant-based diet, then there is improvement in your prostate cancer. So again, proof in principle that yes, and obviously, why wait till you have it before you follow this? That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, why wait till you have these things before we do these things? Yeah, if we do it first, we are fine. So this is cancer. Examples of bowel cancer and prostate cancer. Now, this is why we're coming to an end. So don't worry. We're looking at the brain now, and I want to spend a bit of time here because this is. I've got this title from. There's an article that says epigenetics and the brain, where nature meets nurture. All right. So this is a cross section of the brain. So there's a little bit of background. What can you say about the brain? Just looking at, let me say, look at the colors. What's that? Can you appreciate two different shades? One is what? That's okay. Tell it. White. What is what? A bit darker. I mean, the photo is not very good, but it's gray. Have you heard of people talking about brain as your white matter and your gray matter? Have you heard those? Yeah. Well, gray matter is that, and white matter is that. All right. So that's all. That's brain for you. Now that's that color because of there's two, but it's the same. All right. So you can see the white stuff across here, down here, and from here down, and the rest is all gray matter. See that? Okay. That's because of this thing. These are nerves, nerve cells, neurons, we call them. But really, what gives the color is this. So there are nerve cells that have this thing called myelin, or there's a myelinated action. This is this thing here, the blue thing. It's a covering of this part here. And then those that don't have the covering, they're non-myelinated axons. So the gray areas are these cells, and the white areas are these things. And they grow long, and they have long tracks coming down. So if I show you this picture, this is a bit low, but you can see these things coming right down. These are white, those things here. these white tracks here, they actually extend right down. And that's what the picture here tries to show, that these tracks go down, down through your spinal cord, down, all right? But the gray matter is where all these non-myelinated stuff is. Now, this is to show that the brain is very complex and there's got all of different connections with each other, all right? And we'll come to the importance of this. But you've got two sides, all right, one left and the right, but the picture shows that there's very complex communicating systems, all right? But more importantly now, this is where I want to focus on, all right? So at birth, most of your brain is developed by 5 years, right? 90%. And then between 5 years and year 30, that's it, the brain is, that's it. It doesn't grow any further. So most of the growth is in these first 5 years. So just by knowing that, when do you think the most important time of human development is? Yeah, in this area, because that's where all the connections are starting to be formed. And I don't need to go into this, but you can just imagine that this, if you're going to do some teaching, if you're going to do things, this is the time. Train up a what? Child. He didn't say train up an adult, yeah? Because this is fundamental. So you young folks, planning on having kids, that sort of thing, remember this. Now, we're going to go in a little bit further and talk about this. This is, again, I got this from the website. And again, this is from age 5 to 20, the next bit of development. Now, it's all in color shades, but what can you notice as you go from here to here? What's the difference? The size is about the same, but what's the difference? The color. What does the color show? Yep. Like, what's the difference between that one and that one? Just the color. What? This is really blue, wasn't it? This is very blue. So as you come here, you see that the blue becomes prominent. And whereabouts does the blue become prominent? In the back or at the front? At the front. See that? And where is the center of our brain? Which part of our brain controls everything? The frontal lobe. In more particular, there's an area called the prefrontal lobe. And that is where all the control of the rest of the brain and the rest of us, that's where it comes from. And you can see that most of that development continues. That's the difference between a 5-year-old and say a 20-year-old, all right? That the frontal cortex, the frontal lobe is getting more and more developed. Now, what does that tell you? If that's the bit that controls everything, as you grow older, does it explain something? Teenagers? Yeah? There's not much frontal cortex development, prefrontal cortex development as in the teenagers. They run on emotions. There's a part of their brain, I'm not showing here, but hippocampus, amygdala, those areas are very driven by emotions. So whereas an adult, you see something and you can plan, oh, look, weather's not good, so I'll wait. And then maybe next week or something, I'll move. What a young person say, oh, rain, yeah, let's go out. All right? They're thinking in the emotions, not so much prefrontal cortex suppression of those things. Now, if you get a group of teenagers together, can you imagine what's going to happen? Yeah? I just listen. I mean, in Sydney, I go down to work, I drive in a train, yeah? And the students in the morning, all in the train, and the loudest, and there's some silly things they say. And sometimes you get some of the adults feel, oh, but you must understand, if you understand this, just go easy on them, and so teenagers need support. You can't, sometimes you say, oh, well, let them do what they want. It's the wrong time to say that because they need support. Most of their brain development is still lagging, all right? And as I said, it's complete probably by age 30. all right? So, and obviously some mature earlier, others a bit late, but generally, you know, I mean, sometimes people get married in their 16, 17, 18. It works sometimes, but remember, a lot of it is driven by emotions. And it is our role as adults to just keep an eye on things, yeah? So, but that's a very good illustration of our brain development. First 5 years, most of the connections are made, and the continuing up to the age 30, this particular development of the prefrontal cortex. So understand our teens' behaviors, understand, and that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to, it's not a lecture on parenting, but just understand that, all right? So cortical maturity, which is what the head of the gray matter is called, a cortex, frontal and frontal, that's very important. It's the main decision-making area of the brain and matures by mid-20s and to 30. Now, this is a very important slide because sometimes you say, oh, I just drink alcohol on the weekends only. Oh, I only have 2 and every day or 3 every day. Well, I don't have a lot of pictures, but this is big difference. This particular scan looks, it's a functional MRI. So it looks a little bit deeper and you can see the effects. This is a non-drinker and this is a heavy drinker. Just, you give them test, a memory test, right? This is a memory test. And a non-drinker basically has very good brain activity, yeah? A non-drinker really struggles. So that tells you, again, the effects of this on brain development. This one here, again, this is just comparing MRI of a man and an alcoholic person. And you can see the difference here. Don't worry too much about what's here, but look at this area here. There's a big hole. It's not a hole, but here it's very narrow. Here it's lost a lot of substance. All right, so the area looks big. All right, and this one here again, it's the same scan but more detail, and you can see that you probably won't appreciate on that, but really an alcoholic person, it looks like they've got a lot of holes in their brain. You know, as the scan looks down, software looks down further in. This you don't appreciate it on a standard MRI, but you go down deeper and you can see that there's areas of the brain that's really suffering. All right. So tell our young people, beware of these things. They're not innocuous things. This is there to just give us some hope. All right. Again, this looks at craving, and again, if you look at when someone craves for alcohol, it lights up these areas, all right? And when after treatment, you can see there's hardly any issues there. In other words, you can reverse these things. You can reverse these things. So that gives us hope. Now, what I'm going here, so this is the concept here, something called neuroplasticity, all right? It's about making new connections, importance of environmental cues, nutrition, creating memories. These are all epigenetic cues, all right? Now, what does that mean? It means that, have you seen a family where a person has a stroke? You know, they have a stroke, all right? And they lose, the function of one side of the arm, for example, all right? Now, if you take a scan before that, when they have the stroke, and you repeat one a few weeks or even months later, you'll see an established damaged area, all right? So physically, there is some physical damage. But what do we do with stroke victims? We send them to rehab, all right? And they start working on things. So whilst the sort of pictures on scans might be the same, functionally, they improve, all right? So certain areas of the brain starts taking over their function, all right? What does that mean? Well, for those who do bush walking and things like that, yeah, you might come across a trail that's well-defined, all right? What makes it well-defined? You know, like you can see a good track there. What makes it like that? A lot of people have been there, yeah? People have been walking back and forth around there. Now you go to a place and you find that there's a road there, the hint of a road or a track, but there's bush and things on it. What does that tell you? It's not being used. It's not being used, all right? Now, the simplest way to talk about neuroplasticity and all these things is that we are not, someone might say, oh, I'm wired a particular way. Right? I can't change because I'm wired a particular way. Well, the thing is that if you start, that's what all these rehab things are trying to do, is to open new paths. And you keep doing it. You keep doing it, and by, what happens to that track? It becomes a well-established pathway. All right? And so that is where you go now. You don't necessarily go where the old one's starting to get bush on it, start to be, overhangs and all that. Now you're trying to go this particular pathway, which is a new. That's what neuroplasticity is. It's about changing those pathways. All right? And environmental cues are very important. And we just mentioned that, yeah? I've just mentioned alcohol, but that could apply to any drugs. Yeah, anything that plays up with our brain, mucks up our capacity to think clearly. And so that is why I said this is an interesting text we read last week, because Christ, Moses saying, if you pay attention to his what? Commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought to the Egyptians. So I think this makes it more clearly. He says, worship the Lord your God, and his blessings will be on your what? Food and what? Water, and I will what? Take away sickness from among you. So he's connecting spiritual with the physical. Yeah? And he's a bit more specific here. He's saying food and what? Water. Now, that covers everything, isn't it? Food and water covers everything that the man or human being takes to sustain our bodies. All right, that covers everything. So that's the connection I'm talking about. And so here we talked about it last week. An interesting verse where God, this is Exodus 34, where Moses asked, "Can I see your glory?" All right, and then this is this end of it, which says, "Visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the what? Children, and the what? Children's children to the what? Third and fourth generation." Now, so the question we looked at last week was, is it referring to sin, as in sin? And we found out that, look at this, Deuteronomy 24:16, very clear. Parents not to be put to death for their children, no children put to death for their parents. Each will die for their sins. So it's not talking about that, all right? Same with this in Ezekiel, I think it's more clear. The one who sins is the one who will die. The child will not share the guilt of the parent, nor will the parent share the guilt of the child. Very clear. Yep. So, and then I put this quote up at the end of last time, and I also say, look at this. This is Ellen White saying here, Christ in the wilderness of temptation stood in Adam's place. Here, Christ overcame in the sinner's behalf, how many years? 4,000 years after Adam turned his back on the light of his home. Now, what does Christ come and do? It says, Christ bore the what? Sins and the what? Infirmities of the race as they exist when he came to the earth to help men. So, sins, we know that, yeah. Infirmities, what? Sickness and things like that. Could it be? And I just look at his genealogy, and I've just put 4 up here. All right. All right. This is genealogy of Christ. You know, there's this incestuous father, you know, Pharez, a prostitute, Rahab, Gentiles, Ruth, murderer, David. You can go on. That is the switch markers of Christ's generation. Yeah, right. And it says how many years? 4,000 years. I mean, the study I showed was only 60 years. All right. And you could see the persistence of those problems. So you can see, I believe, this is not from the scriptures. I just believe that this is what it's referring to. That Christ, when he bore the infirmities, it's to say to us, in spite of all that, I have overcome. Yeah. And so it is in his righteousness that we stand, is it? All right. So that, right. And so that's interesting. So this is the thing. I mean, I put appeal there, but it really is, Christ is our creator. Whatever your background is, Christ has that, but he overcame on our behalf. Therefore, grounds for discrimination. You can't say, oh, yeah. It's very common in my place there. People comment on your ancestors. Oh, your great grandmother used to be this and this and this. Oh, and so that's why I can't listen to you. There's no grounds for it. Christ himself had through all of that, and I'm sure all of us. And when he mentions third and fourth generation, I wonder, I think God already knew that if those switch positions not change, it keeps going. Now, what I explained to you last week was this. We find that smoking risk is reducing in Western countries, all right? And so we think, oh, that's good, But the effects of that, we're only one generation out, all right? If you look at those studies, a lot of those damage has been done. You look at the generations that mother has, yeah? And next one. So unless the newer, I'm talking about the next generations in that picture, unless they change their ways, unless we change our habits in terms of what we eat, what we drink, and I believe who we serve, all right? We will struggle. And you might come up with some issues and you think, hey, I've got cancer, but I've never smoked. I've got this, but I've never. What we forget is some of these issues that have already played, yeah? So, this is neuroplasticity. It's about creating new pathways. I like this text. Therefore, if anyone's in Christ, the new creation has come. The old is gone and the new is here. And for some people, I mean, God just healed them and they're sort of craving for alcohol. Craving for smoke goes. But for others, they still struggle. And that's where the pathways are important. Keep going that new pathway. You have to find that and keep going, and then the old one will go away. And the new one suddenly is where you go. All right. So that's what neuroplasticity gives us all us hope. And it starts as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, it starts here. Yeah. That's where it starts. That's where our source and power comes from. And then there's also this thing I want to end with this, because this text, we know this, yeah? They that behold need not a physician, but they are sick. And the church, we keep saying that, is the hospital for what? Sick. But do we? Do we function as a hospital for the sick? I like this. Jesus himself, this is his mission, to proclaim good news to the poor, freedom for the prisoners, sight for the blind, and to set the oppressed free. We may not see it, but some of our members might be suffering from oppression of some sort, under the cloud of some sort. Have we asked them? Not only just, oh, how are you? How was your week? Maybe to our side and say, are you struggling? Anything I can help with? Going a little bit beyond our standard greetings. Yeah? So when they come, they're here, they're amongst us. We are the members. We are the physician of our brother or our sister. Yeah? So that's what it is. So, but unless we inquire, we'll be oppressed when we walk in. We'll still be oppressed when we walk out. We're imprisoned as we walk in. We're still imprisoned as we walk out. I believe to help someone on that new pathway, to help someone to persist and stick with that new pathway, it needs a whole of church approach, yeah? A whole of church approach. To someone struggling with something, that's where we help. Just because you fall down and go back to the old path doesn't mean it's bad. It just means I've got to go back. And you keep doing it, those new connections in the brain will happen. That will happen. We see that. And it gives us hope that as a church, we can be a healthy church. Because if you look at this mission, it covers everything, isn't it? It covers everything. All right? So I will end there. And I'm open to ask questions before we finish. Brother. Exactly. It's a good question. We run out of time, but there's other slides I could have put up. But really, this is the beauty of our health message. It's not, and the clue is in that text, that your food and your water, yeah? And so really, our diet, food, nutrition, as well as the things we drink, are the key for cancer, for diabetes, and all those. This study I put up about prostate cancer and the Mediterranean diet. There's big studies looking at Adventist health people who are living in Loma Linda, yeah? And that again clearly shows longevity, not poor quality longevity, good quality longevity in Adventists in Loma Linda who practice actually our health message in terms of, they're mostly vegetarian, and there's no argument about this, What you find, the reason why you find certain, you will look at certain studies, they say, oh no, but a lot of them are driven by industry. Yeah, driven by industry. Yeah. Everyone knows alcohol is bad. The stuff I put up there, it's not, you just Google, you'll see those. And I've got them from government educational sites. The one on the prefrontal development, that's in the New Zealand, one of the New Zealand government's page as part of their thing. So what I'm saying is, the truth is there. If we should be thankful for the helpful message that's come down to us. Yeah. So I guess one of your something that goes along with what you're asking is that I deal with a lot of malignancies. Yeah. And one of the basic questions they ask, what can I do? I've got this cancer. What can I do? Is there a special diet I can do? Is there a special thing I can do? Very common question. Yeah. And fair enough. And you know what I say? I said a very good plant-based diet. That's it. And someone might say, oh, but I'm getting these supplements. Yeah, I'm getting these supplements. They're quite expensive, very expensive. So I didn't put the slides up, sorry, but basically, if you notice something about vegetables, they're not the same color. Yeah, you notice that? They're not the same color. And a standard thing I tell them is just mix the colors up with your meals. Yeah, so mix them. And you'll find that you get everything that the Creator has put in there for us. And so they say, oh, but someone told me that this supplement is good. I said, that's fine, so long it doesn't break your bank balance. Because otherwise someone's making money out of something. Yeah, but it's, yeah, sorry, Theo.
My question is, we have a health message, and I understand all the science, but where does big pharma come into this, like our pharmaceutical drugs that are prescribed to us? And what's the role of that? And is there a point where pharmaceutical drugs are no longer required to provide fully on lifestyle choices and water? Some people are sick, right?
Yeah.
Sick, they don't go for 20 years.
Yeah.
I just want to
Well, I don't know how to answer, but what is clear is that, for example, with diabetes and high blood pressure and those things, you change your diet and a lot of people come off their medicines. Yeah. And they come off their medicines. Now, there's different levels to pharma. I believe that God gives us wisdom. He gives us knowledge. And some of the discoveries in science have fundamentally changed the world. You talk about the simple penicillin. Simple penicillin. It's been there for how many years? Changed world. So there are things that God gives to us that will fix things. Yeah. Because what you would notice is that you might be living a whole life on what I've just said. You still have cancer. You still have these problems. Because when I started, I said, I don't want to be too simplistic, but there are differences. And one of the things that this shows is that maybe I'm not doing those things, but I've inherited certain things from the past that's sort of come out now. So we see people who've had a very healthy lifestyle, and then they have cancer. Because I don't think you remember the slide on the GIT, the bowel cancer. One of the things is simply aging, simply going old. That's a risk factor. And to illustrate this point, have you heard of skin cancers? Yeah. Have you heard of blood cancers? Have you heard of bowel cancers? Yeah. Have you heard of heart cancer? You don't. Why is that? It's because cardiac muscles don't divide. They're there. They're fixed and they don't divide. So it's cells such as the skin, which divide a lot, are prone to getting mistakes, genetic mutations, all these things. Bowel cancers. Bowel is a very active organ, mistake prone. Blood, very active organ, mistakes come, and either through age or just susceptibility. So I look at things as if there are some things that are common to men. We all get the sunshine, we all get the rain. We all go through difficult times, we all have go to good times. But there are some things that we should be able to, it's in our control, I should say, yeah? And one of that is our diet. So pharma, I don't have any issue with them except that there are businesses. They are businesses. And you know what? They grow bigger because people are investing in them. So what do you think they will do? Well, their thing is profit. They want profit. Okay? But what's the expression? Don't throw the baby with a mouth, Yeah, there is some good stuff there. But I don't trust them in the sense that they will have two same things, but people are using one of them more. And you know what the difference is? Better marketing. So their businesses, their profit is number one, and a lot of them cut corners. So in that sense, be careful. Clear a little bit? Okay, Pastor.
Yeah, mine's not a question.
Yeah.
It's more like a bit of testimony.
Yep.
Last year, my lab results showed that my case was up 7. And that was kind of constraint from my people. And we made an appointment for go for biopsy. That's kind of scary. Just break. But I thought, hey, I did a little bit of lifestyle medicine studies, so I could be able to do both that. I talked to my brother who also did some studies, and he said, give me some more red food in the diet. Watermelon, tomato, and so on. Because of tomato, he said, try pumpkin seed and sunflower. And I went on that. And 2 months later, when I went to the biopsy, prior to that, I did a book. And the road just said, I'm going to have to biopsy.
Amen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He said your numbers have dropped. It was 2.7. From 7.
Yeah.
From 7.
Yep.
And the last test I had was 2 weeks ago.
Amen.
I was on medication.
Yeah.
I just tweaking for that.
Yeah.
That's my story. Last week I was in business meeting in Rotorua. And the pastor gave testimony. He did that pilot. And we have 10,000 total. He said, that ain't gonna be me.
Yep.
He didn't ship. And his story was, he was already on medication for that. He's got rid of medication and he's living a normal life. So it was just that.
Amen. Yeah.
Diet. Of course, the other part might exercise and stuff like that.
Amen. I think that's what I'm trying to put here is that we don't wait for these things to happen. What I've shared is really something to say that you don't have to learn all these things to understand and have faith in the message that we receive in terms of the health. Yeah. This is just science is lagging, you know. The Edenic diet, it's because the person that created us sets those boundaries for our protection. We stay within those. This world of sin, we know that, and we will suffer illnesses and things. But way before them, they start. And I'm talking to myself as just as much as everyone else. Is we practice some of these things. Yeah, the science is going to catch up. You know, they're behind. I'm just putting a little bit there, but I just want to say, encourage us to say that we know what to do. I'm not here to present something new that we need to do. We know what to do, and let's do that. But if we somehow go, then there is remedy too. We can fall back on those programs. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I didn't put you to sleep. And it's